I'd like to call the City of Wheat Ridge Planning Commission for October 17, 2019 to order. Can I get a roll call of members, please?
Melissa Antle,
Here.
Daniel Larson,
Here.
Janet Leo,
Here.
Scott Ohm,
Here.
Jahi Simbai,
Here.
Vivian Voss,
Here.
Will Kearns, and Richard Peterson are absent tonight.
The next order on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Call for vote.
Motion passed 6-0.
Is there a motion to approve the order of minutes for September 5th, 2019?
I move we approve the minutes from September 5th.
Is there a second?
Scott, this says August 15th. Oh, that's when we approved them in,
This is the meeting, we're approving the minutes for September 5th. That was our last meeting that we took minutes at.
okay. So that's right. Thank you.
So is there a second?
I'll second.
Are there any additions or corrections to the order of the minutes? Seeing none, call for vote.
So September 5th. Yeah, September 5th. I was here on the 5th.
Nope.
Is approving those minutes.
Motion passed 4-0 with 2 abstaining.
Okay, I'll open up the public forum. This is the time for any person to speak on any subject not appearing on tonight's agenda. We have 2 cases, an application filed by Wonderland Homes and another ordinance amending section 26-205. Is there anybody that signed up to speak?
No one signed up to speak for the public forum.
Okay, I will close the public forum. Before I start the public hearing, I'd like to welcome the members of the public and ask that you respect the statements made by city staff, the applicant, and my fellow planning commissioners during the proceedings. It is important that the public meeting be conducted in a dignified and respectful manner. Please do not clap, yell, boo, make commentary from the audience, or otherwise disrupt the proceedings. I open up the public hearing for case number WS-18-01 and WZ-18-13, an application filed by Wonderland Homes for approval of a 57-lot subdivision and for approval of a specific development plan for property zone planned residential development and located at 5372 to 5392 Quail Street, and would ask that the applicant, the staff, and anyone from the public who plans to testify or comment, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth in this matter as you know it?
I do.
Thank you. And ask for the staff report.
Can we have the lights turned down, please?
Hi, I'm Scott Cutler. I'm a planner with the City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department, and we're here to hear case numbers WZ-1813 and WS-1801, which is approval of a specific development plan with a major subdivision. I'd like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the subdivision regulations, the zoning ordinance, and this digital presentation. The properties within the City of Wheat Ridge and all appropriate notification and posting requirements have been met. Therefore, Planning Commission has jurisdiction to hear the case.
So noted.
This is a 2018 aerial view of the property. The specific development plan property is outlined in red on the map, and then the subdivision boundary is shaded in purple. It's a little bit larger. It's surrounded by the city of Arvada on 3 sides, and then there's 2 agricultural lots to the south, and then Quail Ridge Estates is the development further to the south in Wheat Ridge. It's just north of Ridge Road and about half a mile from the Wheat Ridge Ward transit station. This is the zoning map. The site is zoned planned residential development, which was approved by City Council in 2018 with an outline development plan. And the properties to the south are zoned A1, including the property which is included in the subdivision boundary. And then further to the south is also zoned PRD, which is the Quail Ridge Estates subdivision. So at this point, the zoning and the outline development plan has been approved by City Council. That was done in April of 2018. That established the permitted uses for the site, the layout, the development standards, which includes heights, setbacks, and density for the site. Tonight we're looking at the specific development plan, which is a detailed site plan, landscape plan, and building elevations, and the document is designed to demonstrate conformance with the already approved zoning. The subdivision creates lots, tracts, easements, alleys, and the public streets as part of the development. And Planning Commission is the final reviewer of the specific development plan. The subdivision goes on to City Council for final review. So the proposed conditions for the site are in compliance with the outline development plan. What that means for this specific project is 42 for-sale townhomes across 10 buildings. There'll be 3 stories with pitched roofs, and then they're all alley loaded. There will also be 14 single-family homes that surround the north and east side of the site. Those will be 2 stories. There are also 6 tracts, which are all commonly maintained by the HOA. That includes open space, drainage, and alleyways, plus some utility easements. And there are also going to be some public streets created as part of this development, 53rd Avenue, 53rd Drive, and Pearson Court. The approved ODP is provided in the staff report for reference, and you can see that nothing has changed regarding the site layout, density, or other standards. The SDP is the second step in the process, the purpose of which is to review the site for compliance with the ODP. This is a map of the SDP, and the SDP is also provided in the staff report. It consists of 12 pages, and this plan is shown on page 2. It goes into greater detail, but I'll describe some of the features. Like I said earlier, that L shape in orange are the single-family homes. They wrap the site and buffer it from the existing single-family homes to the north and east. And then the townhome area is shown in purple. For context, Haskins Station in the city of Arvada is located on the west, so on the west side of Quail Street, as you can see in the map. And that will have a variety of home types, including townhomes, apartments, duplexes, and single-family homes. Each townhome is alley loaded, and the front doors will face landscaped areas or the public streets. And the site will connect to 54th Avenue and Ridge Road via Quail Street. The developers of Haskins Station and Quail Run will coordinate the construction of that street. And yeah, like I said, 4 public streets are being built, 3 in the city of Wheat Ridge, and then 1 Quail Street, mostly in the city of Arvada, except for the sidewalk. Guest parking is provided along the public streets, and some streets have carve-outs to specifically define on-street parking. As well, each unit has a 2-car garage. I'll present the plat in a minute, which shows the lot lines, but it will align pretty much with this. This is an annotated landscape plan for the site. The landscape plan itself is on pages 4 to 6, but I think this document's a little bit better and shows off exactly what's going to go on out there. So it's a colorized version of the landscape plan, which shows potential building footprints. And a feature is tract A and B, which are located at the center of the screen. That's a landscaped paseo, which connects Quail Street to Pearson Court. And this provides an amenity and common space for the townhome residents. The detention pond, which is the drainage facility, it will be located in the southeast corner and is also landscaped. And then the single-family detached homeowners will be responsible for landscaping in their rear yards. Townhome area has approximately 30% landscape coverage, which is required by the ODP. And then fencing will be located along 54th Avenue. No access from this development. Each home will only have access to 53rd Drive, not also 54th. These are some elevations for the buildings showing the proposed architecture. These are on pages 7 to 12 of the SDP. So on the left side of the screen are the single-family homes. They'll all be 2 stories with a 2-car garage. There are 6 types of house with 3 floor plans, and 3 of those are shown here. And a variety of materials are being provided with traditional architecture. And these facades have to add up to a 30% masonry requirement. But some homes will have 0, and others will have close to 100%. Then the townhome buildings will either be 4 or 5 units. You can see both the 4-plex and 5-plex. Garage are located behind. And then side elevations facing public streets will be enhanced with additional windows, masonry, and roof details. So the aerial photo showed the plat and SDP of different boundaries. The red dashed line shows the limits of the PRD zoning and what's being developed as part of this proposal. And then that plat includes that area plus the outlined portion in yellow to the south, which includes lot zone agriculturally, the detention pond, and the extension of Pearson Court to the south. It also includes Tract F, which is a drainage tract, drainage conveyance, which will then tie into the Skyline Estates drainage system via a private property owner's lot. They've actually signed an agreement, which was reviewed and approved by Public Works, as have all drainage and civil documents for this site. So at this point, all civil documents have been approved, the drainage plan has been approved, and that the plat boundary is only different in order to plat Pearson Court and then that drainage tract that's required for the development. So the drainage area is shown in blue on this map, and then Pearson Court will be extended to the south along Tract D to this yellow line. The lot and street layouts match those on the SDP, and then again, you can see the green area is that common landscaped area for the townhome residents. There are other pages in the plat, and they cover easements, tracts for sanitary sewer, drainage, water, utility, and access. And utility easements have been designed in coordination with the utility providers, especially Excel. So like I said earlier, City Council approved the rezoning for this property in April of 2018, and then the SDP and plat are based on the standards approved under the ODP. We did refer this out to outside agencies, including fire, water, and sanitation. No concerns at this point. And then both Public Works and Planning departments have found the SDP, plat, and civil construction documents to be approvable. There's a 15-day public hearing noticing for this site, and letters were sent out to property owners within a 300-foot radius. I received about 4 phone calls, walked through the development with those folks, and sent a few people the actual SDP document. We did not receive any formal written comment as part of this outreach. So staff finds that the request meets the regulations and is consistent with the ODP and is in compliance with all standards in the ODP and city code. The SDP is consistent with the purpose of a planned development, and all agencies conserve the property, so we are recommending approval of this specific development plan. And as well with the plat, we find that it complies with the standards of the subdivision regulations, results in a logical lot layout, and all agencies conserve the property. In this instance, Planning Commission will make a recommendation on the plat for which City Council is the final deciding body, and that's because it's a major subdivision with more than 6 lots. For all those reasons, we're recommending approval of both requests. There are recommended conditions of approval in the staff report, and 2 motions will be required, first for the SDP and then for the plat, because they're 2 separate cases with 2 separate recommendations. I also have an additional condition we are recommending for the plat, which we can distribute when that time comes, and I'd be happy to go over that with you if you have any questions. The applicant and property owner are also here and have a short presentation prepared. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Antle?
I just wanted to confirm that the zoning actually is what determines the density, right? What we're approving here has nothing to do with approving density?
Correct. So the ODP has the exact number of units that would be allowed, and this plan is in conformance with that. So there would be no additional density or units that were not originally approved.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Simai?
Scott, on page 3 of the document you gave us, at the first paragraph, which talks about purchasing a portion of the another property, could you walk me through? I think I understand what this is saying, but could you walk me through that a little bit in more detail?
Sure, and I'll actually go back to the map so you can get a better idea. This might be a good one. So this is the property in question that's part of the subdivision boundary. It's the southernmost lot, 5352 Quail Street. And in order to get the drainage to work as part of this transaction and the plat, this property owner will retain this portion of their property, and then the rear portion of their property will then be owned partially by the city. The Pearson Court extension will be transferred to the city as right-of-way, and then this tract, the water basin, will be transferred to the HOA ownership as part of the development. So this lot's getting smaller. It's still in compliance with the A1 standards because it's still over an acre. But as part of the development, the plat will redo the lot boundaries.
Thank you. Couple of other quick questions. So on page 8, we talk about under the section 5 subdivision plat, right of way. Second paragraph, the majority of Quail Street lies within the city of Arvada and will be built to Arvada roadway specifications, but there's a portion of Quail that lies within Wheat Ridge and will be built to Wheat Ridge specifications. Could you give me an idea what are the differences in specs?
Yeah, so unfortunately, each city has slightly different width requirements for their streets. And the only portion in Wheat Ridge of Quail Street in this area is the sidewalk, which is we consider to be a local street. 5-foot attached sidewalk is the requirement. Part of this development, they're actually building a bit of a detached sidewalk to allow for this on-street parking and landscape buffer. But that's the only portion in the city of Wheat Ridge, and then the rest will be built to the city of Arvada standards. And I believe their street section is actually a little bit wider than the city of Wheat Ridge section. So that's what I meant there.
Yeah, my last question for now, under section 6 on page 9, just a quick question. Under Valley Water, owner is responsible for taps. I hadn't seen that before. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so each house, each unit is required to have their own water tap, which connects to a main line, and then there's a tap fee for each unit, and that allows each house to have their own individual metered service, as opposed to a shared, like an apartment building might have a shared meter, but this will allow each unit to have its individual connection to the street.
Commissioner Larson?
Scott, I'm still a little puzzled about Pearson Court. What we're looking at here does not indicate that Pearson Court extends all the way to Ridge. Is that correct?
That is, yeah, let me pull up the plat. So the right-of-way itself will extend all the way, but as part of the civil documents, I believe it does terminate a little bit before, but the city will actually own all of the land all the way to the southern property line. And if there's, a site redevelops in the future, that will allow a connection to Pearson Street, so that lot would have access. But at this point, I don't want to say temporary versus permanent, but that's the way this development would be built if it moves forward.
So the right-of-way that the city holds now for Pearson ends at that southern line.
The city doesn't own that land currently as right-of-way. The plat would actually dedicate Pearson Court as a public street, as it would dedicate 53rd Place and 53rd Drive. So if the plat is approved, then all of these streets will become public streets that then the city would own down to that southern property line.
And if the southern property is redeveloped, an additional right-of-way would have to be established with that property?
It would. So if you look at this map, for example, Pearson Court would be built to about here. And if in the future, if these properties redevelop, Pearson Court could connect in some form or fashion through this lot to allow for these units or homes or whatever to get access. But there's no plans or anything like that at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Moss?
I do have a couple. Are the utilities underground? Did we talk about that?
I don't believe there are any existing utilities there, but yeah, they would all be underground.
Okay, lights and,
Right.
yeah. And then one of these pictures, so to the question on Pearson Court dead ends there, the traffic flow would be, where's the in and the out? I'm seeing some lines, so I'm not sure if that's, so West 53rd Drive will go out to the west, and West 53rd Place will go out to the west,
Correct.
and then they all have to go up north to West 54th Avenue?
No, so the Quail Street will be built from 54th Avenue to Ridge Road as part of the larger Haskins Station development. And so there will actually be a connection on Quail to the south as well.
So they could go either north or south,
Correct.
but that's the only road. And so I guess if everybody's leaving for their 8 a.m. job, that's some congestion that's going to build up there on, what's at 54th? Has it got a light?
54th connects to the east. Zoom out a little bit. So you've got 54th connecting to the east, and as part of Haskins Stations, 54 will also connect to the west and then south to Ridge Road.
How soon is 54th Avenue to the west connection? Because there's nothing on here now.
The applicant may be able to answer that better. I'm not sure the timing of that development because
Oh,
it's not in the city of Wheat Ridge.
Okay. So they would go north on Quill to 54th, and at this time, they'd have to go east.
Correct.
And then-
Or when Quail is built to the south, and that will all be done
Right.
at the same
And that goes to Ridge, and then on Ridge, they can go east or west.
Right.
Okay. And so do we have traffic issues here when these are all built out?
I can let Jordan respond to that, but traffic study was done as part of, a trip generation report was done as part of the ODP, and no issues came up during then, and that was for the same number of units.
Okay. And then I thought I read where there were parkland fees,
Yes.
but you didn't mention it that I heard anyway. I just wanted to reiterate there are parkland fees in lieu of.
That's correct. Yeah, it'd be about $2,500 per unit.
What is that? If you can go back to the picture where the landscaping is shown. Yeah, so right there on Quail, is that C? And then another picture showed a little bit of open land on the Pearson Court. Are those not sufficient for parkland?
Those wouldn't be city parks, but they're park-like amenities that are
Okay.
used by the residents. So they're considered open space, but they're not public parks owned by the city.
Okay, so that is my lost thought on that is when you're talking fees in lieu of parks, you're talking about publicly or city-owned parks.
Correct.
And most of these developments are never going to have city-owned parks within them.
Correct, except for the very largest. We will likely not see a city park in something of this scale.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Leo? I have a couple questions. On sheet STB 3, under the development standards, it lists the minimum driveway length as 15 feet. What is the typical city standard parking stall length?
That is 18 feet.
Are there any concerns? I mean, I'm not sure what to make of the 15 foot. I mean, honestly, my Outback is 16 feet, and
Yeah.
I've never been confident to pull the nose of my car right to the garage, which means I'm probably going to overhang. I would overhang that sidewalk probably by 2 feet. Maybe it's ahead of its time where all the vehicles are smaller, which would be a good thing. But I do have some concerns over vehicle overhang. I know there is on-street parking, correct?
There is on both sides of that, 53rd Drive, Pearson, and 53rd.
Okay.
Or, sorry, Quail.
If the commission was to approve the, I'm sure staff has worked on that driveway length, but if commission were to approve that and city council were to approve it, I guess would that potentially be a code enforcement if people had a vehicle that is probably over 14 feet in length, I would guess, because they're not going to nose right up to the garage. You'd worry about breaking in.
As far as blocking sidewalks, you mean?
Yeah, the sidewalk has to be able to be walkable, by, wheelchair. There has to be at least, a 3-foot clear path for ADA accessible. How wide is the sidewalk? 5 foot probably?
Yeah, these are all 5-foot sidewalks.
Okay. I'm just curious if that has ever come up in in the staff as far as and like I said, maybe it is ahead of its time, of where a 15-foot length, where everybody has smaller cars, but
Not having the history on that actual requirement here, that was also in the outline development plan.
Okay.
With a minimum driveway length of 15 feet. And
Yeah.
So this site plan shows an alternation of 15 feet to 18 feet driveways, depending on the house. I know some of that was done to make sure that not every house is aligned exactly perfectly, and you get some alternation in architecture and setbacks and things like that. So I think that might have been a trade-off. But
I'll move on to my next question. On sheet SDB 4, the landscape plan, I'll have a few questions on this one. The first question I have is, the street frontage chart only shows Quail Street, YR, West 54th Avenue, West 53rd Drive, West 53rd Place, and Pearson Court excluded from that tree requirement chart.
So that frontage chart specifically refers to the portion of Quail Street where there's a detached sidewalk, and that would require some street trees between the sidewalk and the street. The other streets all have attached sidewalks, and city code requires 1 tree per 70 feet of street frontage. And in this case, it would just be 1 tree per single-family home lot. So the street frontage requirement would be handled at time of building permit when we look at the individual lots to make sure that they each have a street tree. So the difference is those would all be on private property, whereas the Quail Street street trees are on public property in the city right-of-way.
So I guess I think to clarify, are you saying that with all the other streets, not including West 54th Avenue, but not including Quail, that 53rd Drive, 53rd Place, and Pearson, those are private streets, non-city maintained?
No, they're public streets, but the way the right-of-way is, it's an attached sidewalk, and then everything behind that is private property. So the street tree would then go onto private property. But they're public streets. We just don't have, they wouldn't be in the city right-of-way. They would be on private property, but they'd still be a street tree, if that makes sense.
Because the code says required within the minimum building setbacks abutting public right-of-way, 1 tree for every 30 feet.
Correct.
Of street frontage.
So that would be,
It doesn't say attached or detached.
that would be on private property. There would be no way to have a street tree in public property in this area.
Okay. And then so we're just looking at primarily Quail Street. They're supposed to have 13 required trees, but they're only showing 4. Correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the plan.
So that appears to not meet the city's code.
Right, so there are additional 9 trees that are accounted for in the front yard landscaping of the single-family attached, which are the townhomes, and then the house. So lot 1 will also have a street tree on Quail Street. And so those are street trees, but they're on private property. So that's the differentiation, is the trees that you're looking at on the actual plan are in the public right-of-way, and then the other trees that count towards that tree requirement are in the private property.
Those appear to not be showing on the SDP plan.
Correct, and they don't need to be, just as they wouldn't be if we were looking at single-family lots.
So we're supposed to approve a plan that doesn't show what's supposed to be required?
So for building permits, typically we'll handle all of the on-site landscaping at time of building permit. That's specifically true for single-family homes, but for townhome developments as well, they've actually provided a typical landscape plan for a townhome unit on SDP 6. So that shows a schematic of what the landscaping would look like for a townhome product and a single-family detached product. That includes street trees, shrubs, all that stuff. And those species are designed to match the plant schedule on SDP 6 as well. So it's a unique approach, but for something like this, which is a hybrid between a single-family product where we would only be looking at it at time of building permit and something that's a multifamily product that we'd only look at time of SDP, this is kind of a halfway point. So we would be required at time of building permit to hold the developers to the typical schematic, as well as all of the trees that are included on the landscape plan.
I'll move on to the next question, thank you. This is a small thing, but the applicant is showing a tree as like a 6-foot clump, whereas the city requires 2-inch caliper. That's a minor correction. And then in the detention pond, my understanding is that trees are usually not allowed in the detention pond because it causes maintenance issues. Is Public Works approving of the trees in the detention pond, or are these trees above the high water mark?
Jordan, do you want to respond to that one?
Yeah, it looks like these trees would be well out of the high water, 100-year water surface elevation.
Okay, thank you. And then on SDP sheet 8.1 and 8.2, could you just kind of go over, it's showing the dimensions for the city's 35-foot max height appears to be at the midpoint, not the top of the roof. Could you explain that?
Yeah, that's correct. So the city of Wheat Ridge measures building height to the midpoint of a pitched roof. And in this case, all of these developments, all the townhomes are 35 feet to the midpoint of the roof. So the pitched part, taller part, could be slightly above, and that would meet city code.
So how do you know how high the midpoint goes above that 35 feet height, just out of curiosity?
It's going to depend on the building, just because there's some slope on the site, so I don't have an exact figure.
I can ask the applicant on that one.
Okay.
And then on sheet 2, 3, and 4, the final plat, I noticed that track Q shows it as being dedicated to the city of Aurora. I assume that this is an error?
Yes, that should say City of Arvada.
Okay. I have no further questions. Do any
Good
other
eyes.
commissioners have questions? Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Larson.
Scott, this has to do with something that hasn't happened yet, but we see that there is a fairly dense future development called Haskins Station directly across Quail. I realize that may be a bit early, but will those houses that back up to Quail, will their entrance be off of Quail, or will there be a fence there?
That might be a better question for the applicant. Based on looking at the plat for that development, there are also alley-loaded units that will face Quail Street, basically mirroring what's on the Wheat Ridge side.
And it gets to the parking issue again. And if there's, well, okay, we'll talk to the applicant about that one.
Okay.
Well, and I actually had a question about the same thing, is if you had any information on how many units that future development is?
I don't have the exact number. I know it's a very substantial size lot.
How many acres is it?
They might know. I'm really not sure. It's
Right.
multiple times larger than this development.
And we don't know if it's single family, multifamily?
It's a variety. So there's single family, townhomes, duplexes, and I believe potentially multifamily as well.
Okay, I'll see if we can ask the applicant that too. Thank you.
questions for staff? Okay, thank you. We would like to now hear from the applicant. If the applicant could come forward and state your name and address.
Thank you, Commissioners. Hello, my name is Colby O'Haron, and I'm here as a representative of Wonderland Homes, who's the builder for Quail Run Station 53. Briefly, I'd like to give you some history about our company's story, a little bit about our team, and a little bit about our homes. First, a little bit about our origins and history. Wonderland Homes is a locally owned and operated company founded in Boulder, Colorado 53 years ago in 1966. Hopefully it's apparent that I wasn't the founder. However, me and my two partners continue to operate under the premise and mission of it's about character, which is how our company was founded. Character not only as it relates to the aesthetics of the homes that we build, but also the way we conduct our business and the people we choose to be on our team. On the topic of team, our executive team brings more than 100 years of combined experience in the community development and construction. All three of our owners are active day-to-day in our business. 100% of our sales and construction staff are professionally licensed in each of their areas of expertise, which we feel is extremely unique, not only in the state of Colorado, but also on a national level. We hire the best and brightest based upon a myriad of criteria, but no less important than their skill set is their dedication to one of our most important core values, and that's do the right thing. Our homes, Wonderland prides itself on designing for the community. We listen to our customers and fine-tune our plans. We rarely repeat plans for communities. We were one of the first builders in Colorado to fully commit 100% to the Department of Energy's Energy Star program, and since have constructed over 1,400 qualifying homes since 2005. We utilize sustainable construction practices, recycling, install high-efficiency equipment wherever possible, and practice high building science methods wherever possible. Our current homes range from 1,000 square feet to 3,500 square feet. We build from Fort Collins all the way down into Douglas County, and price ranges currently from the low 300s to the high 700s. On behalf of Wonderland Homes, I thank you for your audience, and we look forward to partnering on this community. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Commissioner Simoy. Commissioner Antone?
Yes, I was wondering if you had any information about the Haskell development over in Arvada, just how many units?
I do not know how many, I know it's a couple hundred units.
Okay.
Their plat was just approved in the last couple weeks, I believe.
Okay.
But I know it's hundreds.
Okay, and I know that's not your development, so thank you.
We worked with them directly on the Quail Street improvements, so. 477.
477, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Larson?
So given the breadth of the Haskins Station's development, are you concerned at all about traffic loading on Quail?
Most of the Haskins, from the site plans that I've seen, most of the Haskins traffic goes directly south out of their project to Ridge, and they also have western access as well. My guess is that there will be some traffic on 54th as they're bringing 54th down in through their project connecting to Ridge, but we don't really expect to see a lot of Quail Street traffic.
Will they be parking on both sides of the street?
Quail Street has parking on both sides, yes.
And Wheat Ridge doesn't own both sides of Quail, right?
Just the eastern side.
No questions? Okay, I just have a couple questions. Do you know what is the maximum height of a building on these plans?
I believe the roof pitches on you're speaking of the single-family
Yeah.
attached.
Yep.
I believe the roof pitches are 412, and so that would add maybe a couple feet to that 35 maximum to the ridge.
So like another 5 feet?
2.
2? Okay. I think that's the only question I have. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move on to the citizens forum. There will be a 3-minute time limit, and time may not be yielded to another person. Are there any citizens that have signed up to speak? Okay, it looks like there's 4 people who have signed up. We'll start with Ken Fay. Please state your name and address.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ken Fay, 5393 Parfait Street, Arvada. So I sit on the top lot, adjoining the top right corner of the development there. So I just have 3 things. I'm a little concerned about the development being approved prior to Arvada really building Quail Street. I don't see how that would be really workable, and if there's no way in and out, I'm concerned about how construction would happen without a street. Number 2, when I look at the landscaping, I'm concerned about it might be a little inadequate for the density, and I understand that it might meet the code, but it looks like we're counting the water retention pond as one of the largest pieces of landscaping, and that probably isn't really usable. I understand it serves a purpose for utility, but it's not really an open space people can use because there's water in there, or it may be unsafe for people to actually play in. And my last concern is parking. With the number of units there, I think people have larger cars as opposed to smart cars in general. If I certainly walk around the neighborhood surrounding, there's a lot of trucks and large SUVs, and so I do share the concern of Mr. Ohm that it'd be hard to let people have adequate parking with the length of driveways that are considered here. That's all that I have. Thank you.
Next person is Summer Clark. If you could state your name and address, please.
Summer Clark, 5392 Quail Street, Wheat Ridge. Good evening, Commissioners. My family's estate, and this is just a little history for some who haven't heard it before, but my family's estate has been fondly called the farm, as for more than 50 years my family lived and grew up there along with a variety of farm animals. And for decades, my family's estate near the ridge overlooking Arvada was surrounded by more than 100 acres of open space that we loved, explored, and played on until Rainbow Ridge was developed in the early 1980s, followed by Skyline Estates, which was developed by Melody Homes beginning in early 2000. Now, Skyline Estates borders north and east of Quail Run. In the late 1990s, Melody Homes approached my family with their proposal to build Skyline Estates. My family agreed to oblige Melody Homes and gave them an easement vacation they needed in making their development north of our family farm to succeed. We looked at the developing community as a whole and not at our personal desire to keep the beauty of the ridge for ourselves. In more recent years, we have come to realize that there comes a time when the farm lifestyle in suburbia becomes obsolescent. This realization brought us to consider a solution to appease our neighbors' frustrations about our old farm aesthetics and noisy animals, while improving our neighborhood through the creation of a development to replace a dead-end peninsula area in Wheat Ridge with a fluent new housing plan, with neighborhood harmony in mind, and with thoughtful design and sculptured natural beauty. On a wider scale, this new plan was designed to complementarily match Wheat Ridge's master plan surrounding the Ward Station vision. Quail Run will open the area with fresh, new, and beautifully designed housing that will aesthetically enhance and exponentially add value to the neighborhoods, both present and future, that surround it. We chose to work with Wonderland Homes, a homegrown, exclusive Colorado home builder, to develop Quail Run because we have seen the planning and design of their projects principally directed at the functional, aesthetic use and preservation of the lands they have developed, creating functional open spaces for their communities to enjoy. We hold strongly to the same values they do, which we believe will be a beautiful enhancement to the community and a new legacy for our properties. And someone mentioned about Quail Street. It actually has been approved with the Haskins Station plat, which allowed us to come forward with this hearing. We've been held off a year just for that to happen. So most likely, Haskins will be developed in tandem, or I would say together with this development if it were approved. Thank you.
Thank you. The next on the list is Angela King.
Thank you, Commissioners. Angela King, I live at 5353 Parfait Street, which is directly behind the detention pond on the design there. So I share some of the same concerns. I have some concerns about the detention pond and whether or not, it sounds like it's been approved by the city because of the agreement with the private homeowner, but I'm not sure if any of that was approved by our HOA. And I don't know if the HOA is aware of the drainage that would come into our ditches in the back and then need to drain through all of the homes below the private homeowner that agreed to this. So I would just want to confirm that that has been covered and addressed. Because we've had many discussions as a homeowner group on our Parfait Street, and he's never been involved in any of our discussions. Also, I'm very concerned about additional parking and traffic. We already have a lot of traffic on Ridge Road that's been very complicated by RTD and the trains there, the timing of the lights, and we have a hard time exiting our neighborhood to the south from Parfait. So, you know, we have fought the Haskins development, even though it's been approved by Arvada. It's far too high density for what we're comfortable with and the streets that are there. And everybody's gonna end up exiting to the east, which is all through our neighborhood. And they're gonna go across 54th and then sometimes down through Parfait, because then that takes them over to Ridge Road, and it's the first street that comes out of that area. So we already experience people speeding through there, parking in places that aren't approved. We have a difficult time getting code enforcement to come and write tickets for people. And I would hope that the driveways are large enough that people can actually park there and we can walk around on these sidewalks and not have to walk around vehicles, but that also every single unit has appropriate parking for the number of people that they expect to house there. Because there were some condos built to the south of us off of Parfait, and we fought the same battle with them. I've been an original homeowner in Skyline Estates since 2004, and every time we see a high-density project come in, it just really complicates our parking and traffic. I also have, behind our property are these large agricultural properties, and I know Summer makes it sound like they're an eyesore and that we're welcoming a large development like this, but we are not. We have beautiful, large, mature trees. We're afraid that all of that is gonna be gone and that the smallest and cheapest trees will be put in to satisfy the landscaping needs. I would love to see our mature trees kept if possible, especially through the drainage area, if that's a possibility. You know, we're gonna lose a lot of our privacy and our quality of life with this project by having all of these high-density homes put in behind our properties. And while we know that development has to happen, we'd just like it to be in a way that is less impactful to our current way of life. So I appreciate all of those considerations.
Thank you. And then the last one on the list is Bernie Ames.
Thank you again for taking the time to listen to our concerns and to hear us out wholeheartedly. We do absolutely appreciate your attention to this. I would like to second absolutely everything. Can I get your name and address, please? 63
Could you lower that mic a little bit? Thank you.
I'm short, sorry.
That's okay.
Bernie Ames, and I'm at 5363 Parfait Street. So I'm 2 houses north of where Angela lives. And I just wanted to basically second everything that Angela has said. One of the huge concerns that has been in our neighborhood already is that people come up to 54th and they speed down our street all the time. Again, when they built the
townhomes at the end, or condos at the end of our street, God, 8 years ago, whenever that was built, we saw a huge impact of that already. Getting to Ridge Road, and with all the train traffic that is happening right now, the timing of the lights and getting across Ridge at Miller is very complicated. Literally every morning I'm sitting there already 5 to 10 minutes depending on how the trains are. In my opinion, this area is nowhere near designed and set up to manage this kind of high density that we're talking about. I agree, I love our open space. I have never considered the barns in that property an eyesore in any way. I can say that for myself. I know it's going to change and I can appreciate that. But what I also appreciate is that the height of the houses, the density, the fact that there isn't enough parking, which means that people will be on the street. Even in our neighborhood, there's oftentimes not enough parking, and we have Arvada does allow much wider streets, and Wheat Ridge does. That complicates things, and then you have not enough parking, for cars not to have to be on the sidewalk is a concern as well. So overall, again, I'm concerned about the drainage, because that drainage goes from north to south, and I can tell you the people at the end of our block already, all the silt, all the stuff that comes through there ends at the end of their street, and I'm not sure how that's going to be impacted with this whole property design and the retention pond and how that is impactful there. Again, I understand it's going to change, but you can look at one of the designs and literally the footprint of each of these properties is much smaller than what ours are. I don't feel like it's in line. I feel like it's lesser than, and I would like it to be more similar to what we already have in Skyline Estates. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak? Seeing none, I will close the citizens forum. Okay, there's a couple questions here. Let's start with the roads. There's concerns about construction, what roads are built or going to be soon be built. I guess probably Quail.
Yeah, I can start with that. So we, as approval of this specific development plan or the plat, that doesn't mean that they can just immediately start construction. We actually have a requirement that if this project is approved as part of the subdivision improvement agreement, that Quail Street is completely built prior to issuance of building permits for any of the units. And that allows a connection to 54th Avenue and also to the south, so that there's some assurances there. We would never allow a construction to just start without a connection to a street.
Thank you. And then the next one, let's go into parking. They talked about length of drives and then just parking in general, if there's adequate parking for the project.
Sure. So the plans do require each unit to have a 2-car garage, and then there's on-street parking on both sides of Pearson Court, both sides of 53rd Drive, the north side of 53rd Place, and both sides of Quail Street, which is actually well more than we would require under city code. And you also have some of the driveways, which are 18 feet by 18 feet wide, which would allow for 1, maybe 2 smaller cars to park on there. Yes, some of the driveways are undersized, but that is made up for by the fact that there's on-street parking on both sides on Pearson, all the way down to the south, even towards the detention pond, as well as 53rd Drive and 53rd Place.
And then we had one that mentioned traffic on Parfait as far as circulation pattern.
So Quail Street is also proposed to connect south to Ridge Road, which is another access route which would potentially alleviate some of the pressures on Parfait Street. That's really all I can add. I don't know if anyone else on our team has any comments.
That construction is dependent on Arvada's schedule, going further south to connect?
To my knowledge, yes. That the Quail Street's required to be completed before these developments can get going.
But I mean, south of 53rd Place, is that existing, Quail?
53rd, there's actually 53rd Avenue as well in Quail Ridge Estates. So Quail Street would have to connect to 53rd Avenue and the rest of Quail Street that then goes down. But yeah, there's already a portion of Quail Street constructed as part of the Quail Ridge Estates development, which was just finished earlier this year.
But there's no, once the Quail Street comes from 54th Avenue to 53rd Place, that's it. It doesn't go any further south.
It will go further south, all the way to Ridge Road.
Okay. And then there's a comment about how the detention is considered open space by the city. The
So
landscaping.
I don't know if it actually is for this development. With single-family homes, there's a minimum requirement of open space per lot, and then the townhome portion is required to be at least 30% landscaped. When you include that central park area and then all of the areas around the townhomes, I believe it's well over 30%. The applicant has that exact figure. I don't have that with me. But all of these are in excess of code requirements.
And then the next items are going to be about detention. So maybe we could briefly chat about how existing trees impact detention. That they're talking about, there's some existing trees on site, and maybe in the detention, and if we kept them, how that would impact grading of the detention, or if the detention would work, I guess. Can we keep the existing trees in the detention, I guess is the short question.
I don't think you can. You have to regrade that area, so the trees will probably have to go.
Okay, and then the other questions were about the detention draining. So when it drains, is that going to impact neighboring properties?
No, the grading won't impact the adjacent properties. Just to add on the detention basin, we made them oversize it. So typically you would have a 1 foot freeboard, which is the elevation from the top of the basin to your high water elevation. We required 2 feet of freeboard in this case, just to make sure that it has plenty of capacity, and there won't be any issues.
So when I don't know if that was the answer they're looking for, but I think it's more when they're wondering when that detention pond is filled up and that water is percolating through the soil, will that affect the neighboring properties?
No, it won't. And I think Travis had something to add maybe on the detention.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Travis Frazier. I'm a civil engineer with Redland, 1500 West Canal Court, Littleton, Colorado, 80120. And we did the civil engineering for the project. Regarding the detention pond is sized in conformance with the Skyline the drainage report that was prepared with Skyline Estates. And so that drainage report assumed a certain amount of historic flow coming from this property onto the drainage track in the rear there. And so our detention pond is designed to release at that historic rate. So there should be no negative impacts downstream from our facility. So that's kind of the attempt. That's how we designed it. And we worked with the city and did calculations on the capacity of the channel, the capacity of the pipes, to make sure it's all in conformance. We have a letter from the neighbor that we're discharging onto their property. We have an easement from them. We have a letter from the HOA. We did attempt to meet with the HOA 3 times, and they canceled on us all 3 times. So, we did our best.
Okay.
If there's any other questions related to that, I'm happy to answer.
Are there any questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, to follow up on that, and I know Scott mentioned earlier, and you just referenced the eventual drainage. The water that's detained in this pond eventually, at a known rate, drains out where?
So there's a drainage channel in the back of all those lots. In some places, it's an open channel. It's a concrete U. In other places, the homeowners have piped the channel. And so basically all those lots drain to the rear, and then all of our property drains to that channel. And then it drains down to the south, and it goes into a pipe along the southern lots, and it goes to a detention pond within that development, if that makes sense.
No, it does, and I appreciate that. So you've calculated for a large storm event that the water that flows down to the downstream detention pond is adequate?
Correct. Yeah, so we're releasing that, we're reducing the flows from our site to make sure we're not negatively impacting the downstream infrastructure.
And do you happen to know where the downstream detention pond drains into?
It drains further to the east, and then I believe it goes underneath the railroad tracks.
Because that whole area is a north to south slope, right?
Yep, correct. And like I said, we work to be in conformance with the drainage report that was prepared with that subdivision.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other questions for? No? Okay, thank you.
Yep, and then just one thing, in an interim condition, this Quail Street concern, we are proposing to build the full section of Quail Street adjacent to our property so traffic can function. And then we've been working really closely with Haskins Station on this joint Quail Street development and making sure everything's coordinated. And we end up with a complete road from 54th down to 53rd. So.
And I would just add the concerns about additional traffic on Parfait Street. Don't really see that being an issue because Quail Street will connect from 54th down to Ridge before any of these units go in. So there'd really be no reason for somebody to go up to 54th and head east and then come down Parfait. They would typically just go down Quail Street if they were going to head south. So don't really anticipate any impacts to the traffic on Parfait Street.
Commissioner Voss?
I had a question. It was mentioned that there would be no negative on drainage. What do the residents do if there is a negative and they feel that the drainage is leaking into their home, their basement, their property? What is their recourse if that should happen?
It's a fair question, but I don't think we're in a position to answer that speculative future condition where something that we don't believe will happen, what the recourse would be.
Okay, I'm just making sure the neighbors know if they have any options with future events that we none have control over.
The detention basin actually is size large enough so it will actually reduce the flows that are currently happening. So the flows when the detention basin are in will be less than they are now.
I think too, I'd like to add that there's an existing drainage easement down the rear of all those lots that exists for the purpose of conveying this flow. It's there to convey flow from those properties and per their drainage report from this property to the west. That's what the channel and the pipe is seeing in today.
Okay, hopefully that helps the residents that are concerned about this. And then I had another question. There was a comment that every home is required with a two-car garage. What if nobody parks in their garage and everybody's out on the street and everybody's in their driveway? What does that look like?
If I could answer that, I mean, Scott has stated this, but the citywide requirement for parking for single-family homes where there is on-street parking is that you have two off-street spaces. Those can be in a driveway, they can be in a garage. So the standard citywide for all single-family homes is that you have two off-street spaces, whether that be in a driveway or in a garage, if there's on-street parking. So I just want to reiterate that this project is far exceeding minimum standards that apply citywide.
Even if no one parks in their garage?
We can't control that any place.
No, I know, but that's a large possibility with how people operate. That's what the neighbors have to live with, is how everybody operates. So just a question for a thought.
It looks like somebody from the audience wishes to speak again. Do we wish to reopen the citizens forum?
Sure.
Okay, we will reopen the citizens forum.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I don't want to belabor the point about the drainage, but knowing my neighbors, Not every single storm ditch across the back of their properties is free and clear. People who've chosen to cover them or fill them with rocks or do different things, I just want to make sure that every single person south of that point understands that water could be draining through there, and that if they haven't spoken with our HOA, which I know we can't control whether or not the HOA responds to them, but I don't feel we can proceed without HOA understanding and agreement on this point, because we already have issues with our drainage in that ditch, and they're assuming that we can just handle more water, but they're not getting agreement from all of the owners. And there's a good, 5 to 7 houses south of the owner who agreed to do this, and none of them are aware that he agreed to do that. So I see this as a major sticking point for us, and I appreciate you considering that.
Thank you. I will now close the citizens forum. Perhaps we could have the applicant from Redland come up and just, in very general terms, explain kind of the process of, I understand the drainage report, the geotech report, and how, I guess, how you come to, when you design the, design the detention, as far as what the state, if the state allows drainage to change, or if you're able to add more water that flows, if you could just maybe.
The variables for capacity.
Yeah.
So I just want to clarify something. It's not going to be more water. It's going to be less water. And there's an easement there that was put in specifically to handle any future development on this site, to convey the flows from this site. And if anyone were to go in there and disturb the channel, they aren't allowed to do that. That's an easement, so they would be in violation of that easement. But if it's currently handling the water, which it is, it will be able to handle the water from the developed site.
So is the easement that is on the east of the subject property?
It's in the backyards of the homes and the adjacent development, the Skyline Estates.
Okay.
So it's right along the property line. I think it's a 10-foot easement.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add to that question or clarification you're seeking from the applicant? Is maybe also talk about, to Jordan's point, about how much increased water flow might you expect, regardless of storm events, but when you develop a parcel? Like, are you seeing less permeable surfaces, which increases water flow? And maybe that's why they have a concern about how much capacity there is to take in more water?
Yeah, definitely. So, obviously when you develop a site and you pave it and you add roofs, you're going to increase the impervious area. So there's less area for water to infiltrate into the ground, and that increases the runoff. So when you develop a site, inherently you're going to have more runoff from that property. That's why we construct detention ponds, because the detention ponds capture that water and they hold it, and they allow us to release that water at the historic rates. So that's the whole purpose of this pond, is to limit and basically create no negative downstream impacts, because we're releasing the water at the historic rate. A significant portion, if not all, this property today drains to the east, and so during a rain event, all that water will find its way to the east and into that channel. And so our goal with this pond is to mimic that historic condition. So we're not going to be increasing the flow in that channel. We're going to be limiting to the historic rate that's there today, but we're going to be draining it through our detention pond. So after, what could happen is, after a rain event, the pond will drain and you'll see water coming out at a reduced rate through that channel out to its downstream path. But we're controlling it and we're releasing it at the historic rate. And, to their concern with sediment, it's also a water quality pond. So the pond is designed to function to reduce trash, oil, sand, anything that comes out of the streets in the neighborhood. It's designed to capture that, keep it in the pond, and release water at a cleaner rate than it came in.
Any questions?
I do. So there seems to be concern from Angela, I believe, spoke about it specifically on this HOA. No one's meeting with them. And I don't know the ins and outs of HOA, but can someone speak to the importance of why she feels it's necessary that the HOA is involved? And even though you've attempted to meet with them and they're not, can this not be something that's specifically done?
I mean, we've been coordinating with the property owner that the pond is directly adjacent to. We've been coordinating with the HOA. I know Summer's been involved in that for a couple years now as this project's developed. You know, we attempted to meet with them a few times and it was canceled on us every time. And so, you know, we attempted, we did our best. We've had open lines of communication. We've been open to working with them. We want to be good stewards. We want to be good neighbors. We want to have people support and buy in. We want to have them understand what's going on. That's our goal. And I believe maybe Summer has a, yep.
Yeah, actually, it's been 3 years I've been working with the HOA, and we have had a few times where we tried to get the whole team to meet with their board, which they did cancel. But on the other hand, they gave us a letter that they approved all of the drainage and whatever went through. So we have a letter from the HOA with their approval of this drainage, so.
Is that a letter you can share with the residents that are here tonight that are concerned?
Yeah, there is, we, absolutely, yeah. I have the letter in my computer, but also the city has the letter, I believe, as well.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about sharing a letter on your computer with the
Oh,
residents
okay.
at this
But I
point.
think you have the letter as well. We gave that to you a year ago.
We have the letter from the private property owner who has, I guess, given the right to connect to that side, but I'm not aware of the other.
There is a letter from the HOA as well that has shown approval from the board. So I know, we have a few different planners that have been working at this case since it's been some years working on it. So maybe last year with Meredith or with Zach, they may have had it, but we can make sure you get it again if you don't have it, so.
Yes,
Thank you.
and at the very least, if we could have that before the city council hearing for record.
Yeah, we can forward it this evening and after the hearing, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other?
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for staff or the applicant from the commissioners? One question I did have for staff is I believe that you had a condition that you wanted to share with us. Was it above and beyond what was already in the packet?
It was. So it was involving the construction of Quail Street, connecting 54th to to Ridge Road. And that was basically just a condition to require the coordination between the Quail Run developers and the Haskins Station development to get Quail Street completed.
Okay. I see it here now. Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? Go ahead. Not. We can, yeah, but I just want to see if you had any questions for the applicant or staff.
Well, one more.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Scott, on this recommended additional condition, explain how or what a reconfiguration of the intersection would be.
So it's not shown on this map, but when we were receiving public comment, we had a couple of concerns from the neighborhood to the south, Quail Ridge Estates, about the design of how Quail Street intersects with 53rd Avenue, which is the street to the south. There are three 53rds in this area. 53rd is the southernmost. 53rd Avenue is the southernmost 53rd. And it would intersect at an angle, and there were some concerns about the safety of that intersection. And as part of the Haskins Station development, they actually have a plan to redesign that intersection to allow for basically a T intersection as opposed to an offset intersection, which would be a safer condition. So we inserted that in the event that A, public comment came up tonight about that, so you'd be aware, but also just showing you that there's been a lot of coordination between the two developers in the event that both projects move forward about Quail Street's construction.
One question I did have for staff is a possible condition for the lack of street trees, but the what the applicant is saying that they're, here's a typical, which is kind of an odd, I guess, kind of a gray area. I know sometimes we have things recorded, correction stuff before city council. I assume there will be some type of, construction documents. So I don't know if we need to make a condition that states that the minimum quantity of trees along Quill Street should be met prior to a CO. If we should have something like that. Because right now the typicals are, who knows, there could be water, there's no utilities on this SDP, so you can have water, you can have sewer, you can have gas. Each one of those are going to require a horizontal separation for the trees. And so, although that might be a typical, the reality is you just may not be able to put the tree there. And so, I really want some assurances that they are meeting the code. If the code says 13, then we shall have 13. And if that means we need to make a condition that says prior to the CO, then perhaps, I just want to see what your thoughts are on crafting that condition.
I think that's within your discretion. I would say, though, that we already review and are planning on tracking requirements such as that, the cumulative open space for the site and the masonry through the building permit process. And so the tree is something really easy to add to the chart of this unit provided 2 street trees, so we have 7 more to go. It's a pretty easy thing to keep track of at time of building permit. And because we have such a small staff, I anticipate if this project's approved to be reviewing those myself. So,
Okay.
if that's enough assurance, but it's also within your discretion to add a condition.
Okay. Do the fellow commissioners, what do you think about the language of minimum quantity of trees along Quill Street shall be met prior to a CO?
Repeat that?
Minimum quantity of trees along Quill Street shall be met. Quantity of trees along Quill Street shall be met prior to a CO.
What's the minimum?
It's 13, whatever the minimum is, it says 13, but it's just the minimum, whatever the minimum quantity is along, so, because right now they're saying that, we're so many trees short, but we have some typicals, but we're not quite showing, so we're in that gray area, and the only way that's gonna happen is once they do the construction documents and they actually show every single tree, which they need to know where all the utilities are. There's a lot of information that we don't have, so. And then the other condition that I think we should consider is that there are a couple minor corrections on the plat that lists Aurora instead of Arvada. And so a typical condition that we've done in the past is that all minor corrections occur prior to city council hearing for that one. Does that sound fair? That would be a condition. You would have to make the conditions. Hi.
Hi, I'm sorry, I have one comment on the
Yes.
I'm Susan Wade, I'm also in Redland, 1500 Canal Court, Littleton. On the townhomes, reserving the CO for the trees makes it a little hard when you might be selling one versus all 4. If we could find another way to track the trees, as Scott had maybe recommended, that would probably help for the attached units, different than the single family.
I appreciate that. I'm not, I just don't know about those assurances versus the CO. It would have been much easier if the trees were just showing on the SDP, and then we could have, the location doesn't have to be tied in stone, but to visually see the 13 trees along Quill Street, I would have been much more in favor of, but having to say that right now we have a typical, and like I said, there could be horizontal separations for water, for sewer, for gas, and I would like some real assurances, and I think holding back the CO And we are the recommending body to city council. So between now and city council, if that condition, I'm sure the city council could, between staff and city council, maybe they make something other than what we proposed. But I feel pretty strongly about right now what the CO.
I want to interrupt real quick. So the landscaping would actually need to be tied to the specific development plan which you're approving this evening, whereas the other conditions are tied to the plat. So my concern with tying it to the plat is that city council is only reviewing the plat and they're not looking at anything except for the plat document. So having that condition on there won't really make any sense in the context of the plat, whereas it makes a lot of sense in the condition of the specific development plan. So that would be like condition 1 on the approval of the SDP. I would also say, to your point, we actually require landscaping is installed prior to CO anyway, and that's individual units. That doesn't mean you can't have someone close on the house, but you can't actually occupy a unit until the landscaping is completed. So that's a pretty standard practice in the city and would be kind of in line with what Commissioner Ohm is saying.
So for these conditions, the first item up on this list is the specific development plan. And then the plat is really just, if we make the condition about the plat, is that the specific development plan, we would start with that one. Would we need the condition, would we need both of these two new conditions that I suggested on both of these, or just the one?
What was the other condition?
The other condition was just, it was really, the one was about the trees, and the other one was about the plat. There's error, it says City of Aurora, we need to have, that's minor correction.
That would be a condition on the plat, and the landscaping would be a condition on the specific development plan. And based on the timing of the plat, that correction would likely need to be made at print instead of prior to city council, given that we...
Make it be prior to recordation?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, we can, you're talking about the condition of, there's a HOA letter. Well, that needs to be entered into the record, I think is what you're, it's dependent upon the applicant submitting that to staff, and then staff, I guess, providing that to city council. I don't know if
I'm not sure if that should be a condition. While I certainly agree that it's very appropriate that they've been and continue to reach out to the HOA. As Jordan noted, this is a platted drainage easement that, frankly, since the platting of Skyline Estates 15 or so years ago, was anticipated to be used for exactly this purpose. So I'm not sure that a formal approval from the HOA is required. So I wouldn't want to condition something that actually isn't required, particularly given that they at least have testified that they've struggled to get the HOA to sit down to a meeting. So we'll certainly try, at a staff level, we'll certainly track down that document that Summer indicated she has, but I'd just be hesitant to add it as a condition because I'm not sure it's legally required.
Well, that's fine then. I just want to satisfy the fact that there's a letter out there and no one's seen it other than...
Yeah, we'll be sure to coordinate that with Summer, and it may already be in the file.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions for the applicant or staff? Okay, at this point, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the specific development plan. I move to approve case number WZ 1813, a request for approval of a specific development plan for the property zoned planned residential development located at 5372 and 5392 Quail Street for the following reasons. Number one, the specific development plan is consistent with the intent and purpose of a plan development as stated in section 26301 of the city code. The specific development plan is consistent with the intent and purpose of the outline development plan. Number 3, the proposed uses are consistent with those approved by the outline development plan. Number 4, all responding agencies have indicated they can serve the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense. Number 5, the specific development plan is in compliance with the applicable standards set forth in the outline development plan and with the city's adopted codes and policies. There is one condition, and that would be, as Scott was referencing, to ensure that the minimum, I think that one's part of the plat,
Oh, the plat, okay, yeah.
that the minimum quantity of trees are put in on Quail Street, and they meet the landscape requirements before a C of O is issued for the property.
Is there a second? Second. Are there any other conditions to add? Any discussion? Call for a vote?
I just want to say, this is definitely a difficult thing. I mean, we're Wheat Ridge, and we've got partners in Arvada, and this is, it's tough. But I think I appreciate what the developers are trying to do, and I hope that this turns out the best. I'll be voting in favor. I think that the conditions have been met.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Call for vote?
Motion passed 6-0.
And it looks like the next motion is for the subdivision?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of case number WS 1801, a request for approval of a major subdivision for property zoned planned residential development and agricultural 1 located at 5352, 5372, and 5392 Quail Street for the following reasons. All agencies can provide services to the property with improvements installed at the developer's expense. The plat will result in a logical layout consistent with future development proposed by the specific development plan. The requirements of Article 4 of the Zoning and Development Code have been met with the following conditions. Number 1, the reception number of the Quail Street right-of-way in Arvada will be filled in prior to the recordation of the SDP and plat. The developer shall enter into a subdivision improvement agreement and lot sale restriction covenant agreement prior to recordation of the subdivision plat. Number 3, prior to issuance of building permits, the developer shall provide homeowners association covenants for review by staff. Number 4, prior to recordation, the applicant shall pay the required fees in lieu of parkland dedication. And there are 2 more. The first one, number 5, reconfiguration of the intersection of West 53rd Avenue and Quail Street shall be completed to the satisfaction of the city. And number 6, all minor corrections to the plat occur prior to recordation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any other conditions or any other discussion? Seeing none, call for vote.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. I would now like to open up the public hearing for case number ZOA-19-04, an ordinance amending section 26-205 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning the development standards for minor accessory structures in residential 1 zone district, and ask for the staff report.
was just waiting for things to quiet down a little with people leaving. Good evening. My name is Zareen Tasneem, and I'm a planner with the City of Wheat Ridge Community Development Department. Tonight, I'm presenting case number. Sorry. I'm presenting case number ZOA-19-04, which is an ordinance amending section 26-205 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning the regulation of minor accessory structures in the Residential 1 Zone District. I'd like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the zoning ordinance, and this digital presentation. All appropriate posting requirements have been met, therefore the Planning Commission does have jurisdiction to hear this case. So in 2009, the City of Wheat Ridge's residential development standards were modified in the Zoning and Development Code. As a result, the side and rear setbacks for accessory structures are now 5 to 10 feet in most residential zone districts. However, there was a conscious policy decision at the time to not change the Residential 1 standard, which require 15-foot side and rear yard setbacks for all structures. Staff hears from property owners who are often displeased with the impact of the 15-foot setback in R1, particularly with sheds, and feeling that they kind of float in the middle of the backyard with these 15-foot setbacks. Recently, City Council directed staff to explore the option of a code amendment to reduce setbacks for accessory structures in the R1 zone district. At a study session on August 19th, staff presented an analysis of the code and other jurisdictions' regulations as it relates to the setbacks of accessory structures in R1. Council consensus was to reduce the minimum rear and side yard setbacks to 5 feet, but only for accessory structures 200 square feet or less in size. Which leads us to the proposed ordinance attached to your staff report that reflects Council's decision and includes 2 text amendments to the zoning code. One is for this minor accessory structures in R1 to be limited to a maximum size of 200 square feet instead of 400. And 2, the minimum side and rear setbacks are 5 feet for these minor accessory structures in R1 instead of the current 15. Based on this change, any detached structure over 200 square feet in R1 would become classified as a major accessory structure and would need to meet the 15-foot side and rear setbacks. So staff recommends approval, and the next step would be a City Council public hearing set for October 28th. This concludes the staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Samayan?
2 questions, I believe. Zareen, it said in 10 years there were 160 or something requests for chain variance, and only 8 were granted. That's correct? Am I saying it right? 156. I don't know. I mean, do we need to change it? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's necessary. I mean, that's just. I guess it's not even a question. It's just a statement. My question is, in terms of the minor, did the city council, or should we consider the maximum height being changed as well? 200 square feet and 10 foot is still a pretty big structure, and I make assumptions that the setback was for some reason, maybe based on the size, and so it's still big, and it's now closer to the street, and so maybe we should consider reducing the height requirement, or maximum height allowed. I guess I have 2 statements rather than questions. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Anton?
Well, I feel like this is pretty straightforward, but based on what you said, I do want to look back at if there were 56 applications and only 8 were processed. What's the reason for that?
Sure. So we get the variance requests coming in is basically for all zone districts within the city relating to front setbacks or any other sort of fence height variation. So the variances are covering the whole city, all zone districts, everything. So while only 8 kind of move forward specifically related to side and rear, that's not to say on a day-to-day basis we don't hear from people that live in R1 requesting interest in a variance that they might not go forward with. Yes, specifically for side and rear setbacks in the R1 zone district. So it's very specific to that since this is what the ordinance is for.
Or do you feel like, to Jahai's point, like, is there an urgent need to change this? Not urgent, but is there a need to change this? So is it just trying to make sure the code represents kind of what is already happening in R1, or could you expand kind of what is the emphasis for this?
So as Zareen said in her presentation, when we amended kind of all the residential zone district regulations several years back, and to quote her, I mean, we very consciously said, we're not touching R1. And the reason for that was we had just adopted a comp plan that said, you know, we want to really encourage revitalization on our commercial corridors and reinvestment, but we want to really value our existing established residential neighborhoods. And a lot of those are zoned R1. Having said that, I would say as someone who was here at the time that if we hadn't kind of set that policy direction, we would have proposed to amend the code in this manner back in 2000, was it 10? When was that year?
2009.
2009. So we didn't for just that specific reason, but we would have at least recommended that that be considered. So as has been said, I mean, this comes up frequently because it's just, you know, R1 lots are big, but they're not an acre, right? They're 12,000 feet typically, or that's the minimum, 12,500. So that it really does put those small sheds kind of floating out, again, to quote Zareen, in the middle of a backyard. So notwithstanding Commissioner Simbai's comment that they're not tiny, they're still impactful, we think it's appropriate that they could be located that close to property lines. So I don't want to say there's a pressing need, but we definitely hear the complaint with some regularity.
Thank you.
Commissioner Larson?
To follow up on the last question, the issue after the comprehensive development was approved in 2009, in that 10 years, the city has received, there have been inquiries about, can I put a less than 200 square foot structure in my backyard? And the city's response is, yes, you can, but it has to be, if you're R1, it has to be 15 feet away from the rear or the side.
That's correct.
Are there a lot of these? I'm not sure I would, okay, I guess not. It's just one of these sort of gray area questions that gets back to what Jahai was saying. Is there a pressing need for the city to change this? And I would tend to ask that question of any proposed change to an ordinance. Is there a pressing need to change it? Is it okay the way it is? And it sounds like the staff's position is that there is enough interest from homeowners looking to add accessory dwelling, not a dwelling, sorry. These are absolutely not dwellings, right?
No. R1 only allows...
Even the major ones they're not dwellings, right?
Yeah, so R1 only allows single-family residential dwellings. You can only have one.
Right.
The main structure.
In R1?
Yes.
Okay, I got it. But I guess as I think this over a little bit more, it does seem like it would normalize sort of the setback requirements for all for all the different classifications. 5 to 10 feet for everybody, right? But again, and it just, is there enough of a demand? Are there enough people asking for this change to really justify it?
Go ahead.
So on a variance, is there any notification to neighbors on a variance request?
Yes.
And so if there's a 200 square foot building that's going to be 10 feet closer to a property line that could potentially be to 35 feet,
No.
what's the height?
So currently, minor accessory structures can only go up to 10 feet.
So even a 10 foot, 5 feet from a property line, and there's no limit on what the structure could be. It could have a 8 foot with a 10 foot, with a 2 foot attic, or something that has windows accessible. I'm wondering if it's too close, too high for privacy levels on some given properties, and might we just stick with the thought of a variance controlling these issues? And a variance brings in extra money to the city, right?
There's a $200 application fee.
Yeah. So, I guess with the 8 requests, the few, obviously it's not a big deal, because if these people are inquiring about it and they're not going to pay the $200 for the variance, they obviously don't need it that badly or care to have the 5 foot setback changed, 15 to 5. Or we'd be seeing way more money in the coffers and way more processed.
Well, so a couple things. I think one of the property owners who recently, was talking with a council person, and one of the reasons they put this on the agenda for discussion and now have given some direction, that individual's opinion was, they were given the option for a variance. And their response, it's obviously just their opinion, none of us need to share it, but was, I get that there's a variance and I could do that, but on principle, I shouldn't have to get a variance for this because the development regulation doesn't make sense. And I think that's what spoke to, at least one council person to say, we should make the right policy change, if you all agree it is, and not put people through a variance process if we've got the regulation wrong.
Well, I think a variance process is just what it's supposed to be for, acknowledgement to the landowners that are affected by a close building or a height building, and I think it's better that they're notified and they have recourse on speaking to a variance with you, or is it just they're notified and that's it?
Oh, yeah, certainly they can submit written objections, and if they do submit written objections, that triggers a Board of Adjustment hearing automatically, even if it's otherwise eligible for administrative action.
Right. Okay, well, that answers, I think, and then the study, was it a study session you presented to City Council?
Correct.
Is there any reason we didn't get to see what the minutes of that were and the discussion level? Because you've already done first reading at City Council before we've even seen this. And so I'm kind of wondering, is that the progress we're supposed to be having with a code of law change? Is it goes to council on first reading and then comes to planning?
I think it depends sometimes.
So it's not necessarily supposed to be that way. Most everything comes to planning first and then goes to council. And so, was there any reason that that was done last week?
I don't know what the discussions were in terms of setting the agenda. I don't set the council agenda. We, generally speaking, try to avoid a first reading at council before a planning commission has taken action. But we, obviously, you would never have a public hearing before the planning commission has forwarded its recommendation, and we'll forward, obviously, whatever your recommendation is to city council. But there's nothing codified as to, the timing of first reading relative to the planning commission hearing. So it's just, our practice has been generally to have the first reading occur after the planning commission action, but there certainly have been plenty of exceptions to that for a variety of scheduling reasons. It could have been related to wanting to get this to the, in front of the current council before, having a new group that might have a different policy direction.
So basically, what Zareen told us was probably what was the actual presentation to city council on the study session that you refer to?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Voss. And I'll do you after.
So we would consider sheds as permanent structures. We'd consider them as accessory structures, and they would fall under this minor accessory structure category. So typically, you might see sheds around town that are 120 square feet. So this category is something that would address that. So that's where that conversation comes up. We hear from citizens saying, I have a 60-foot square foot shed. Does it have to be 15 feet away from it? Or I have a 120-foot square foot shed. Why does it have to be 15 feet away from it? Where every other zone district, you can put it up to 5 feet to the property line or whatever. Why do I need to go through the variance process just for this 60-foot shed, as you mentioned? Go through that whole process. So that's part of the reason that this kind of code amendment discussion kind of came about. No, so basically anything 0 to 200 square feet, that's an accessory structure, so a shed or a gazebo or anything like that. It would have to be current, or with this code amendment, it can be up to 5 feet. The current code, it's 15 feet. So putting some perspective on that. If you're in R1.
No, it wouldn't. I mean, there's certain de minimis, standards. I've said before, I find it in my best interest as a planning director to not regulate tree houses and lemonade stands, and I think dog houses would probably fall in that same category. So there's some judgment that needs to be used there. So, and to Ms. Leo's comments, I would speculate that there are thousands of non-conforming sheds in the city of Wheat Ridge and in most cities. And one reason is that, people just choose not to pull a permit and roll the dice. Maybe they talk to their neighbors and everyone's okay and they just kind of move forward, and that's the real world that we live in, right? But the other more code-based reason is that any accessory structure that's less than 120 square feet does not require a permit. So there's no reason for that person even to necessarily have a conversation with the city to say, well, what is the setback? They might just call up and say, I'm planning to do a 100 square foot shed. Do I need a permit? and we'd say no. We'd probably also hopefully say it does need to meet setbacks, but they probably hear that first part, right, which is it doesn't require a permit.
You had another question?
Thank you. Just so I'm clear and for the record, in addition to the setback change to the ordinance, the proposed ordinance also reduces the parameter for a minor structure from 400 square feet to 200 square feet.
Correct, and that was an amendment that a suggestion that City Council made during study session, that number.
The other residential zones,
Yes.
is this changing it now to conform with them? Or do they already consider a 400 square foot coverage as still a minor?
So most would, I don't have the code book in front of me, so it's a little different. Some would, but the difference is in other zone districts, the typical side yard setback is 5 feet for major or minor accessory structure, regardless of the square feet.
So it really doesn't matter then?
Yeah, and then.
5 feet,
Yeah.
if you're building a 1,000-foot garage or something. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
In other zone districts.
So on the other districts, like say R2, R3, what are those setbacks?
Sure.
Do you know offhand?
Yeah, so in R2, for both major and minor accessory structures, it's 5 feet for the side setback. And then for a major accessory structure in R2, if it's less or equal to 10 feet in height, the rear yard setback is 5 feet. If it's greater than 10 feet in height, then the rear yard setback is 10 feet. That's for a major accessory structure in R2. If it's a minor accessory structure in R2, then both the side yard and the rear yard setback is 5 feet.
Okay. I mean, I would say I'm fine with this. I mean, I think it's hard for. I mean, there's like so many people that want to put a little shed in, you know, and it's like, how much is a shed? You know, well, I guess you could spend a couple $1,000 on a shed, but probably most people just have a couple $100. So to then go ahead and have to do a variance for a couple $100 shed, I wouldn't be too happy about that. So going from especially if it's a small structure, what's the ballpark square footage of a R1 lot versus an R2?
So the minimum square footage for a R1 zone district lot is 12,500 square feet, and that's for a one family. And then for a one family that can be built in a R2, the minimum square footage is 9,000 square feet. 9,000.
9,000. I mean, I still don't see justifying, even with the square footage difference of saying, well, the R1 is 3,000 square feet, so now you need to be 3 times away from the property line. That doesn't seem fair, you know, when you think about it that way. It's like 15 versus 5. I know where the 5 come from. I'm actually probably more of a why a 5? I mean, to be honest, I have a small backyard, and it's like I don't have a shed back there because it's like if I go 5 feet away, I'm tearing up too much real estate. You know, it's just dead space. And you know, almost every shed I see in my neighborhood, I don't know if I could even say that one, and I live in R2, is a 5 foot. I would say most likely they're probably about 2. And when I've had past conversations with the staff, they said, well, you know, these are old structures, they're grandfathered in. So in short, I'm definitely in favor of switching from 15 to 5 for this R1. I have no objection to it. And my understanding is that I think the 5 foot probably comes from, is it the fire department? Where they came up with the number 5?
That minimum in general?
Yeah. Where does that number come from?
In terms of fire rating of occupied structures, 5 feet is certainly a number that's in the building code and fire codes in terms of triggering different fire ratings for windows and other combustible materials.
I mean, because probably most of the fences in Wheat Ridge, a lot of them are cedar, and they're dry and they're old. And probably most of the sheds are probably storing, gas engines and stuff, but there are some sheds now that are the fancier type of shed, and you can walk in and it's like a little extension of your house, I guess. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it. I would be even in favor of reducing the 5 foot, even down further, but that's for another time. Any other questions?
I mean, I'm not against this at any stretch of the imagination. It seems pretty straightforward. The only issue is it was 15 for some reason, and that is what I can't understand. But why wasn't it 5 in the first place? If it was 15 for some reason in R1, and that must have meant something to somebody, and here we come in and change it without understanding why it was that. And I made an assumption it was because it was big, but that's all. I mean, that's my main issue. Is what's the history behind it? It was written as 15. It meant something. It's not written as 15 in R. I mean, at 5. It's not written as 5 feet in R. I mean, it's written as 5 feet in R2, R3. For some reason, in R1, it's written as 15 as a setback. And so, who am I to come in and just, without any knowledge, say, yeah, it makes sense? I just want to understand. It makes sense, but historically, it doesn't make sense why it was 15. So why would we change it?
What's the height in R2?
Height for what?
This type of building?
For a minor?
Yeah.
I think
It should also be 10. So in general, across the board, there are some differences between a minor accessory structure and a major accessory structure.
We're talking minor on this one.
Yeah, so for minor, it's 10 feet, and then for a major, it's 15 feet.
So minor, 10 feet in an R2 as well as an R1?
Yeah.
Okay. What I see is you've got 9,000 square feet in an R2, and that's probably not necessitating someone wanting to put in 10 feet. And then you've got 12,500 square feet where they could possibly, very likely, put in a 10-foot high. And I just think that's encroaching on neighbors more than it would be on someone who doesn't see the need for a 10-foot high in an R2. Thus, it's not as encroaching. Just bring that point up.
What about when we've talked about stepping back a building, for instance, like in a mixed-use setting, what is the typical height where the building has to start, when it's getting close to, property line where that building has to start stepping away? You can't just build straight up and then there's the neighbor, right?
Well, in R1 you can, that's what they've been doing.
Well, I'm not talking about R1, but I'm just saying like what you're talking about, the context of having a height and you're worried about the neighbor seeing, and so there's something that it's worked out where, right, I don't know if it's mixed-use neighborhood, mixed-use.
No, we have it in a few places. We have it in our mixed-use districts, and we also have it in, we have it effectively with our bulk plan ordinance, which applies to R1C. So those, generally speaking, only get triggered above 2 stories.
Above 2 stories, okay. And how close generally do those get to the property line?
Well, I mean, in mixed use, the step back requirement would be for every additional story, you step it back an additional 5 feet.
But what's the starting setback?
I can't quote that for mixed use.
But in terms of bulk plane standards in R1C and R3, the way that works is 15 feet up above the property lines on each property line, and then you take a 45-degree angle. So it starts at that 15 feet, which is less than the height or equal to the height for the accessory structures.
Story and a half. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, are there concerns that someone's going to do, besides a shed, like you do a 10-foot structure? It's got
What would a
a little
10-foot
slope. It's got a little sloped roof,
Well, it
and
could
there's
just
windows
be
in the back.
a one
And then
slope,
someone
yeah.
puts in a ladder and a loft,
Yeah.
And so then they're invading the neighbor's property. Is that
Well,
concern?
there's all sorts of possibilities, but even if you put in a slope roof that would generally drain into your neighbor's property, if you're 5 feet from it and you've got a roof that's sloped, because you're not, that's what you want to do, you know, then I see issues there. I mean, we can think of all sorts of things, probably, but
How does that relate to what's being put before us today, though? They're asking us to just reduce the square footage size and the setbacks.
well, I think.
I mean, we could choose any item in the code and say, are people really gonna follow it, or are they just gonna do what they want? I mean, because kind of the line of thinking you're saying is like, well, okay, it says 10 feet, but they could add an attic or create a loft, but that could happen with anything, right? I mean, so I'm not sure what you're trying to control for with this.
Probably more the 10-foot availability in height that close to property line.
So it is very specific to, does that change your perception if you're 10 feet closer? Because to me, then, it's just saying, in R1, I mean, I see this from two different perspectives. One was the point that Scott made earlier, where I have my lot isn't huge, and when I moved in, there was a storage shed, because I only have a one-car garage. If I was forced to kind of do 15 feet on each side, and it may be that way, like, you're asking people to put that in the middle of your yard, right? But then from the perspective of how height works, it's kind of the view shed, the vantage point you have. So if I'm in my backyard and all of a sudden I'm looking 5 feet instead of 15 feet, will I notice, I guess that's the question, is at what point do you consider I'm gonna notice something that's 10 feet high? Is it me in my backyard, or is it me in my house?
Well, my property sits my backyard to my neighbor's backyard.
Right.
So I do have that consideration of if they build a 10-foot that close to my property line fence, that would be a concern. Number one, it blocks my view of whatever the view is. And number two, it's too, I just think it's just more of a eyesore, that I have to look at, as opposed to just normal land, most people. So I think that's a big consideration too, and that's why I would suggest a variance on these, because all properties aren't side to side to side to side. And we do have this backyard to backyard, which I think is a consideration.
So I just want to make a quick point that all the other, in relation to this discussion, all the other residential zone districts within the city of Wheat Ridge for a minor accessory structure, all of them are currently minimum 5-yard rear and side setbacks for all other zone districts within the city of Wheat Ridge. It's only the R1 that's currently 15 feet. So
That's my issue.
That doesn't sway me any.
That just is my issue. Like, everything else is 5. Some reason R1 is 15. And
I mean, we don't have that history. Just to set the record clear, that's a 1969 zoning code requirement.
The typical, those plastic sheds you put together that you buy at Home Depot are about 10 foot at the pit, at the point. They're not high. 10 foot is not high. You walk in there, a 6-foot person would walk in there, and the pitch would be 3 feet above their head or something. And if you have a fence that's 6 foot, you're just talking about the pitch of the shed that starts at the fence and goes up. We're not talking about anything that's going to block. I mean, they're all over the place. They're all over the city. And to have to put them, those small, maybe they're 10 by 12 or something on the ground, to have to put them 15 feet away, I've never seen that. They're all close to the fences. So I just think that it makes sense to reduce, for the minor structure, makes sense to reduce that. It doesn't make sense to have it 15 feet.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the 200 square feet. I mean, what would a footprint of a 200 square typical shed look like? I think most of the sheds that I see around here are like maybe a 12 by 8 or a 12 by 10. They're not, but that's not 200 square feet.
No, right, so it would be less than 2, most of them are less.
Right, but that's not what's before us. What's before us is 200 square feet, 5 feet away. Yeah.
My final comment, then I'll shut up. Ken, if it was 1969 where they created this, they must have created, unless others have changed over the years, they must have created 5 feet back then too, for the other zones. And so, I'm just saying, there was some reason, some people back then thought 15 feet was right for this particular zoning, where they thought 5 feet was right for other places, and that's my struggle. I would wish I knew what they were thinking, so that we didn't mess that up. But if we can just say, if I could just say that to council, just make, double check, I'd be okay to pass this.
Has there been any studies on neighboring communities? So like, what does Arvada, not Denver, but like Arvada, Golden, Lakewood, like what's in their R1 for setback, minor accessory, the similar language that you're looking at? Where do we compare, and this proposal compare to what they have for allowing what would be the intent of a shed?
Sure. So in Arvada, I don't have the square footage right in front of me, but I do have the setbacks. So the equivalent to an R1 in Arvada is called a residential estate. That has a minimum lot size of 12,500 square feet and a minimum lot width of 100 feet, so similar to our R1. What they classify, or the equivalent of a minor accessory structure in Arvada, the minimum side yard and the minimum rear yard setback are both 0 feet. 0 in Arvada.
And they have some big lots.
And that's for the exact same size lot as an R1. Well, in some cases, right across the street from us in Arvada.
Okay. So we've heard the staff. There's now I need to open up the citizens forum. There are no citizens here, so I will close the citizens forum. Now I would entertain a motion.
Go ahead. Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance amending section 26-205 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning the regulation of minor accessory structures in the residential 1 zone district, R1.
Second. Is there a second? Is there any discussion? Call for vote.
Motion carries 5-1.
Okay, thank you. Is there any old business? It says people speak update.
We briefed you all on this as part of your training just a week or so ago, and a couple days later briefed council, and they were very supportive of moving to this platform to augment opportunities for public input on land use cases. So we have a meeting coming up with the software developer, and we don't have a definitive schedule yet, but we're moving forward with the budget's been approved, and hope to have it implemented in the first part of 2020, hopefully January timeframe. So we're moving forward.
How many, just offhand, how many Denver metro communities other than Lakewood are doing this?
I think, I don't, in terms of the actual online public hearings, I definitely can't say. I know Denver's looking at the People Speak platform as well, and have been for longer than we have, but things take time in a bigger organization like that. And certainly, and we shared this with council, we're hearing certainly, we just went to the state planning conference and went to a couple programs on neighborhood engagement. So I think a lot of communities are looking really hard at how they engage their citizens in different ways, in creative ways and effective ways. But specifically to the public hearing type of platform, I'm only officially aware of Lakewood.
Is there any questions?
Yeah, and after our last session, I gave it a bit more thought, because I think when it was first introduced, none of us were that familiar with it, but we are all familiar with the things that can go wrong with social media, and initially I saw this as simply a platform for people to sound off. After reading over the document again, it sounds like this is something that can be managed and directed, and allow interested parties to comment on developments as they occur, as opposed to having to take time away from their families or whatever to attend. So I fully support what you guys are doing.
Keep us posted.
Yeah, we certainly will, because you'll be required to have some training. It shouldn't be too complicated, but
That was coming.
but we need you to know how to use it. So,
Any other comments?
Not on old business, I have something on new.
Okay, new business?
The Planning Commission page off the city website where you go government and planning, the agenda's not on that page. I had to go to calendar to find that. Do you know why that might be? It seems to be a guessing game as to
Which page?
the city.
It's on the calendar because a lot of people get on the calendar and then they want to view the agenda. It's also, I think usually if I get in the search engine on the website, then you just put Planning Commission minutes and you get the option, and it goes to a specific page that shows all the agendas or the most recent. I can't remember how to exactly get there, but it's in the search engine.
Okay, could there not be a link on the Planning Commission page that has the agendas, like the City Council page has the agenda and minutes?
I'd have
link?
to look to see what page it's actually on and let you know, but it's within that planning agenda or Planning Commission thing. I'm just not sure where it is.
Yeah,
I just
didn't-
know it's there.
I didn't find it at all. You had to go to calendar to find it and get the agenda on calendar.
There's one other spot that it's on the
Okay, let me
website.
know where
I
it
just
is.
can't off the top of my head tell you where.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, I just want to echo that because I was in a situation earlier this week where I was trying to access it, and it's like you have to go to recent planning agenda. It says recent like minutes and planning agenda, so it's kind of confusing, like how you just download the current agenda for the meeting you have scheduled for that week. So maybe just take a look at it, and maybe we're just
It also does say view all, I believe, because it's for minutes and agenda. It says view all or view recent, and you can choose which one.
Melissa, was that on the Planning Commission page? Because I didn't even see that at all.
Well, because I did Google in Wheat Ridge Planning Commission, like I figured that'd be the easiest way to access it. But I mean, maybe it's just take another look. I mean, maybe, believe me, I don't pretend to be the savviest page navigator, but
It's nice to find it in several different ways, like I had to search for a calendar and then find that we had a meeting tonight, and then there was the agenda. But what about the people that just go Planning Commission?
we
And
can
then,
take a look.
yeah, Okay.
We could just roll that into the People Speak, you know,
How you look,
learning
how you
experience.
find your
Well,
agenda?
I mean, the information's there, it's just a question of how many places you can
Right.
logically provide a link, so we're glad to take a look.
Okay.
I guess I just had another comment, is it possible to just get our packet digitally? Or have that as an option? You know, like when you send out the email to us saying, are you coming to the meeting? Is it possible to just get a digital format for the packet? Because it would certainly give me more options to review things, at least till we get this new Wheat Ridge Speaks online.
So, it's certainly possible, city council gets their packets digitally. They also all have city-funded Surface Pros that they can bring to the meeting, which is not something that we have for you. So I think the potential disconnect would just be, you know, how you would get that information here to the meeting so that you had everything that was in the packet available at your disposal at the actual public hearing.
Yeah, I guess not to create more work for staff, but when to just give me this packet digitally as well as printing it. Because I agree that can be an issue because people only rely on the paper version to review the packet. But sometimes it's easier for me to just review something digitally, and since you already compile it, to print it.
So I've asked that same exact question digitally, and anyway, I talked to Tammy, and she said go to the calendar, and there's a way you can download, right? The packet.
Under
and-
agenda.
And then you can put on agenda. I mean, I'm not sure as far as like why can't we just be emailed a link? I know it's, you know, it's data, and I do business all the time, and it's like I just use Dropbox links because I don't want to be getting files back and forth. I just choose up my data. But you know, to get some type of link or something. But otherwise, yeah, I just go to the calendar when I want to download something.
Sometimes it's just easier. I mean, believe me, like when I look at these 11x7 sheets.
They're hard.
Yeah, but actually you can zoom in on those.
Well, you can really zoom in on the digital ones on the PDF.
That could be my stopgap is.
I mean, I'm not sure that it would cost the city anything to send us a link and the paper, you know. But otherwise, I can just.
Somebody's already compiled this
Yeah.
electronically because they have to print it for all of us.
It's either one extra step for staff, or it's we take the extra step and we go to calendar and download it.
But she's emailing us saying, "Are you attending at the
Right,
meeting?" So
right.
when you just say, "Are you attending at the meeting?" Here's the packet.
Here's the packet link.
It's a PDF.
I'd prefer a link.
The most efficient.
Yeah, I'd prefer a link than some huge
Yeah, I mean, I
20
agree.
megabyte file, you know.
I probably downloaded way too many megabytes this week.
Yeah.
on that.
If I could just take another minute. Wheat Ridge Speaks is what we're kind of referring to, the People Speak update.
We reserve the right to tweak that branding a little.
Okay. I would suggest, I like Wheat Ridge Listens. So I'll put that out there.
Any other new business?
Janet, did
Somebody
you
taped it.
DVR? DVD? That's my. You're not a true Broncos fan if you would read the spoiler alert.
On that, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second? Call for vote.
I'm sorry. I was up and out of here.
Motion passed 6-0.